Hi kids, welcome to Teacher Julie's Kitchen. Today I'm going to make bagels. And what I want to tell you about bagels are a bread product. So they're made a lot like bread. And what makes bread different from like a pie crust? Or what makes bread different from a cookie or a cake is yeast. Bread gets that beautiful spongy texture with all the big holes in it or little holes in it from yeast. And yeast is a tiny, tiny, tiny single-celled organism. It's a fungi, which is one of my favorite creatures in the world. And it's not a plant, it's not an animal, but it breathes air in and out just like we do. And it has lots and lots and lots of individual creatures living together in a colony. So we're going to make a colony of yeast. It's the first step for making bread is to make yeast in a form that can be incorporated into your bread. So from the store, yeast comes from the store looking like powder, funny colored powder. So we use 2 teaspoons of yeast, powdered yeast. We buy these big bags of powdered yeast because we make a lot of bread things in my family. You can get little packets. 1 packet is equal to 2 teaspoons. Oh, this is a half teaspoon. I have to put a couple more of these in. I thought this was a teaspoon. It's a half teaspoon. And then we put in a tablespoon of sugar. This is my measuring tablespoon. And I put the yeast and the sugar in a bowl. And now I'm pouring 1 cup of warm water. It's nice and warm water in. And I'm just going to stir it a little bit. You don't want to mess with it too much at this point. You just want it to dissolve and grow a yeast culture. And you'll know that your yeast is good when it gets very foamy. I'll show you what it looks like now, and then we'll look at it again in 10 minutes. So we're going to build this little colony of yeast in this bowl with some sugar for food and powdered yeast, which is like yeast seeds, I guess, and some warm water. And you want the temperature of the water to be just warm to your skin because yeast live and like the same temperatures as our skin. So if your skin thinks that water feels nice and warm, the yeast will like it too. That's how you know what temperature to make your yeast. So I'll come back in 10 minutes and see if we have a nice foamy yeast culture going. While we're waiting, I wanted to make sure you got a good look at the recipe right from the beginning. There's the yeast culture, the dry ingredients. The wet ingredient is just water, and then in the boiling water, we put a little baking soda. So it's just some flour, a little tiny bit of sugar and yeast, some salt, and some baking soda. So I want you to see what a good culture looks like. Let's tilt this down where you can see better into the, there you go. It's foamy, it's got bubbles all over it. It's kind of slimy and shiny looking, maybe I would say. That, oh, that is a good culture of yeast. Slimy, shiny, bubbly, foamy, not at all like it looked when we first put it in there. Okay, so let's prepare to do the next step. Here's the bowl. We're going to mix the dry ingredients. So dry ingredients, 3 cups of bread flour, half a cup of whole wheat flour, and some salt. So bread flour, whole wheat flour. In my family, this is the best flour for making bread. Bob's Red Mill just makes the best breads. I highly recommend Bob's Red Mill. It's local. It's environmentally sustainable-ish, more environmentally sustainable than many farming practices and milling practices. And the guy's cool. Local guy. Okay, so there's 3 cups of bread flour and a half a cup of whole wheat flour. Now you don't have to do this part. If you do not want to use whole wheat flour, don't just put in another half cup of the Bob's Red Mill or other bread flour, and that's fine. I'm the person that always wants to add a little bit of whole grain to everything if I can, because the more fiber, the better. And teaspoon and a half of salt. So that'll be 3 of these. These are half teaspoon. Oh, that's 1.5 of these. 2 half. Okay, I'm just going to stir this with my little spoon. It does not have to be really super well blended, but you just don't want to be able to see any of the whole wheat flour or the salt separate. Just get it more or less mixed in. You're going to be doing lots of mixing, but at this phase, you'll end up with a dough that's got more whole wheat in clumps. We don't want that. We want that whole wheat flour dispersed. Okay, now you create a little well inside your bowl, and I'm just using that same silly little measuring spoon and just pushing the powder up around the edges, leaving a well in the middle. And into that well, first we will pour the yeast, and then we will pour up to about a half a cup of water. Let me get some more warm water. Okay, so that's 3/4 of a cup of water. We're not going to use all of it at once. I'll show you what we do here. Mixing with our hands. So you want to make sure your hands are clean. I just washed my hands as usual in the kitchen, and I'm going to pour the yeast into the middle of that well. Get all that sugar into it. Some sugar at the bottom. And I'm going to put about half of this water in, so just about a half a cup, leaving about a 1/4 cup in it. Now that'll be adjustable, or this dough is adjustable, and that's because every day when you make, or every time that you make a bread, so many things in the environment can impact the texture of your bread, like how much moisture is in the air and what the temperature is and what elevation you're at, atmospheric pressure, barometric pressure. All these things can absolutely impact your baking. So what worked today when it's starting to rain and what works on a hot sunny day will be a little different. So this is very wet right now. I'll show you how wet it is. It's sticking to my hands. It's a big clumpy mess. So I will be adding more water. And it being a rainy day, I'm going to try not to add too much. And I'm going to create like a place where I'm pouring the water onto the dough, not into the bowl. Because the more water that hits the actual bowl, the bigger the mess in the bowl will be. Here we go. This is just going to be perfect. I can feel it. We still have powder to pick up. Oops, the dough is pretty sticky, but I have the sense that there's enough moisture in the dough to pick up the rest of this flour and for it to be just right. All right. Still working on getting all the flour into this dough. I'm starting to think I might need a little more water because I have not gotten all of the powder mixed in. And the reason you don't want to use any other kind of a mixing utensil for this kind of a job, if you have a mixing bowl with a bread dough, that bread hook attachment on it, you can pretty much make this whole thing, this whole aspect, this whole part of the bagels in that, everything but making the yeast culture. And that's great. But for those of you that are doing this for the upper body workout, it just takes time and you have to be patient. But if you use a wooden spoon or something, you're going to snap that thing because it is that stiff. It's a very stiff dough, probably stiffer than any other bread you're going to make by hand. Okay, so see the bowl has no more powder in it. Everything's in the dough. I'm going to turn it out onto a floured surface and we are going to knead this for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, upper body workout. Now, kneading, I tend to use my knuckles or the heel of my hand. And I'll just do this for a second to show you. A lot of times I'll switch off sides. So I get workout left, then I work out right, then I work out left, I work out right. And sometimes I use my fist to do the turning, and sometimes I use the heel of my hand to do the turning. But either way, we're going to keep this up for 10 minutes. And I'm going to put some water in this bowl. And when the 10 minutes is up, I'm going to wipe out this bowl and we're going to use it again. So don't throw a bunch of dirty dishes in your bowl like this and throw it in your sink to get it out of the way. Just put some water in it. We're going to be using it to rise the dough. Raise the dough to rise. Okay, I'm going to put you on hold while I knead, and I'll come back about a minute in from the end of the kneading for you. Okay, we're 5 minutes in, and I want to say to you that the dough has become much more elastic. It starts to feel like chewing gum a little bit, not quite as sticky as chewing gum, but that thick, smooth structure like gum. Really hard, really firm. And I've picked up all the extra flour off my board. Well, not all of it, but most of it. And I'm going to pause again. We'll see how different the dough is when it comes to 10 minutes. But at 5 minutes, stretchy, elasticy, gum-like texture. Okay, so we have entered minute 9. So I'm going to go ahead and let you watch the last little bit. This dough does not stick at all to my hands now. It leaves my hands feeling smooth and almost like I've moisturized them. And I think I'm just picking that up out of the dough. It's firm, gummy, gelatinous, I don't know. Feels great. It's a great feeling. And those of you who have used a dough hook and your mixing bowl, I mean, more power to you. But this is a nice sensory experience and also a good workout, upper body workout. Okay, that's it. So my dough, it's almost like I don't want to stop. My dough has been kneaded. I have kneaded my dough. Kneaded, K-N-E, knead. See how I don't want to stop? Ooh, it just feels cool. Okay, the next part is, let me get my bowl again. You don't have to get everything out of the bowl. I'm just over here with my fingertips pushing some of the stuck on portions of the dough off of it. You want a wet bowl, relatively clean and free of clumpy things. It doesn't have to be clean, clean. And what we do is just put a little tiny bit of oil in the bottom, about a teaspoon. I don't measure this part. It's just to oil the bowl, and it becomes a nice environment for that bread dough to rise in. Gives it all the moisture it needs, and it keeps it from sticking to the sides of the bowl. And the last step is to cover that with a damp towel, which I use a flour cloth sack, plain white cotton that I've wet down in the sink. It's wrung out, and I have it sitting right over here. Now this dough is going to double in size. So let's look at it for a second. There's the dough ball. And when it's doubled in size, I expect it to be just about at the, maybe a little tiny bit under the top of the bowl and have filled out all around the edges. So it should be touching the glass up to about this height, and it should be in total almost to the top of the bowl. And that would be doubled. So I'm going to go set it over there on the stove in a nice warm spot. And 40 to 60 minutes from now, I will come back and show you what it looks like. Hello, welcome back. The dough has easily doubled in size. Right where I said it should be, doubled in size. So we're going to punch it down and then turn it out and let it rest. So punching it down, you can do in the bowl, and you just want to push all the air out. You may think, what the heck? I let it rise all that time, and now I'm just going to knock all that air out. But what you're really doing is multiplying the amount of air bubbles that you'll get. You're breaking a few of them, but that dough is full of air bubbles. It's completely different texture than it was earlier. Okay, so I punched it down good. Now I'm going to turn it out on my dough, on my floured surface, and cover it with that damp towel and let it rest another 10 minutes. So I'm going to pause. We're only on step 4. Let the dough sit for a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes. It's come back up a little bit. We're going to leave it the way it is and divide it into sections. Tool du jour for this. I don't have a bench knife anymore. So now we're going to divide this. I want you to really watch how we do this. We're going to divide it into 8 equal sections, which is just a series of cutting everything in half. So first, I'm going to cut the dough in half. If you put a little flour on your knife, it helps cut right through. Okay. Then I'm going to cut those 2 halves in half. for me, the easy way to cut the halves and halves again is to go like a pie and cut each of the halves in half again. This recipe makes 8 biggish bagels. You are welcome to cut the dough smaller. It'll affect the bake time, but if you want smaller bagels, you could do it smaller. Okay. Now we're going to take each of these and roll it between our palms or on the floured surface with our palm to produce a nice, tight little circle. So now I've got my headset on. I'll repeat some of that. Divided the dough into 8 equal pieces by cutting the dough in half, cutting each half in half, and cutting each of those halves into little pie-shaped halves. And now I am, even though these are supposed to be even, some of them look a lot bigger. It's okay. And now I'm turning them into little balls of dough by rolling them. I like rolling them between my hands. You just want to do the round and round till all the little places where you folded the dough smooths over. I think I'm done with the damp cloth. We used that damp cloth 3 times. Now to do this part, making the bagel, put some flour, good flour amount on your finger, stick it through there, and then I like to spin it around until that hole gets to be just the right size for a bagel. Put some flour on your finger, poke it through, spin it around. You really can tell the difference between if you put flour on your finger to do that or not. This one's the biggest one. That one got really big, and one side of it kind of came unstuck from itself. So I'm going to push those back together. A little water. So yeah, if your bagel has any loose pieces, you can put a little water there and it'll close them back up. Okay, there you go. Bagels. I'm going to put them on this tray. Oh, and I do need that cloth one more time. And cover it with the damp cloth. And now it's time to turn on the stove to boil water and preheat the oven to 450, I think. There it goes. Okay, I'm gonna pause it again. So into the water that we're putting on to boil, we're gonna put some baking soda. It's 1 1/2 tablespoon. So this is 1 tablespoon. And this is 1/2 tablespoon. All right. And here is the damp cloth back over the bagels that are resting and getting ready to go in the water when it boils. We'll pause again until the water boils and the oven preheats. We're also going to prepare the seasoning, dippy. This is what I'm using, my preference. So I'm going to start a little plate. And I'll dip the bagels into this when they come out. Also, my tool du jour, something like this works. This is my tool that I use for this. This is perfect because it supports the whole bagel and the water drips through. So the water is getting hot, the oven is preheating, and we are waiting for these to set and this to boil. You can sort of see the baking soda in the pot. And we'll wait for the water to boil. Okay, that water is boiling. Trying to tell if the camera can see. That water is boiling. I'm going to turn it down now to lower temperature, like down to low, to get it to simmer. And I'm just going to wait till the boil settles down. And the reason we do that is if it's really boiling hard, when you drop the bagel in and the baking soda's in the water, it surges a little. So you don't want it to be like, and some of these, I was going to show, like some of these, as they were sitting here, the holes have gotten small again. Now I just kind of spin them around my finger again and open that back up. So it looks more like a donut going into the water. So this is going to be our first one in. Woo, you just drop it in and it floats. And see how it foamed up a little bit? Hope you can see that. I could move my, oh yeah, you can. 1 minute. That's been about 30 seconds. I'm going to drop another in. The deal being you can do 2 or maybe even 3, But you just don't want to cool the water down too much, and you don't want to put so many in that they come in contact with each other. Second 30 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and flip this one over. Woo! I usually just kind of tip it and flop them over. They splash a little, but it's not too bad. Oops. Okay, this one's been in long enough. You want about a minute on each side. I'm going to turn this up just a little. Oops. You're just setting the surface on the outside. And then I put it in the tray of toppings. And I just use my finger to take it out of there and put it back on there. That's one ready to go in the oven. And this has gotten kind of wet, so you kind of mush it around. Ready for the next one. "30 seconds. This one's in here. Okay, I'm going to have to put some more toppings in my little tray. And I will continue on this way, and I'll show you when I get almost done, because you don't need to watch every single one. You get the idea. Okay, ta-da, I'm back. We're on the last two, which I'm going to flip this one over, yep, that way, and take this one out. And there's my plate, the toppings. Getting down to the very bottom of the toppings, so I'm just going to try and use them all up on these last two. Oh, that one got a lot. The next one might not get so many. I can always sprinkle a few extras on. I'm going to turn off this hot water as we're done with it. These slippery little bagels are ready to go in the oven. I'm going to just try and knock all the leftovers of this plate onto this one. Okay. Messy fingers. All right, into the oven they go. Set the timer for 20 minutes, and we should have some beautiful bagels. When that timer goes off, I'll turn it back on just as the timer's going off. Not quite ready, but starting to golden brown just a bit. Okay, the timer went off, and it's time to take my beautiful bagels out of the oven. They look perfect. They look huge. The yeast definitely did its job. Oh, some of them a little darker on the toppings than I like. There they are. 8 beautiful bagels.